Walk through a bustling market in Ghana today, and you will see stalls overflowing with cheap, imported tomato paste, often displaying Italian names and flags. Out in the fields of northern Ghana, local harvests are collapsing into rot. Farmers are forced to watch millions of tons of fresh tomatoes decay because they cannot find buyers who can match the rock-bottom price of the imported cans. This contradiction is even more stark in neighboring Nigeria. In Kano, investors built a $20 million state-of-the-art tomato processing plant to supply the domestic market. Today, it sits practically idle, a ghost plant with no work to do. Nigeria grows 1.5 million tons of fresh tomatoes every year, yet the country still drains $300 million from its economy annually to import foreign paste from abroad. A legally rigged global supply chain creates this outcome, the intended result of international trade policies designed to favor foreign surpluses over local production. The source of this surplus is Italy. Italy produces over 5 million tons of tomatoes annually, making it Europe's top grower, with roughly 90% of that output processed strictly for export. This massive output is fueled by the European Union's Common Agricultural Policy. The Common Agricultural Policy is a system of agricultural subsidies and programs that provides massive financial support to farmers within the European Union. These subsidies cover up to 65% of the final price of Italian tomato products, giving processors an artificial advantage that drives prices down globally. The EU further incentivized shipments by reimbursing processors €45 for every single ton of paste they exported overseas. These incentives drove a 650% surge of cheap Italian paste into West Africa between 1998 and 2003, mathematically undercutting the price of any tomato grown locally. Italian market dominance is built on state-sponsored overproduction, using government wealth to weaponize exports against the agricultural sectors of poorer nations. If Ghana and Nigeria wanted to protect their vulnerable local factories, the logical move was to raise import tariffs. But by the 1980s and 90s, they had lost the power to do so. Facing severe debt crises, these nations were pressured by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank are global financial institutions that provide loans to countries experiencing economic distress. In exchange for bailout money, these institutions demanded governments adopt structural adjustment programs. Structural adjustment programs are sets of mandatory free market economic policies, like cutting state subsidies and liberalizing trade, imposed on borrowing nations as a condition for loans. Under these programs, leaders like Ghana's Jerry Rawlings were forced to withdraw state support for domestic farmers and drastically slash import duties on agricultural goods to as low as 10%. These forced reforms stripped West African industries of their legal and financial shields, leaving their borders wide open at the exact moment the European import tsunami arrived. When governments attempted to reverse course to save their farmers, they were blocked by the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is an intergovernmental body that regulates and enforces international trade rules between nations. In 2003, Ghana's parliament voted to double tariffs on agricultural imports to stem the flood, but the measure lasted only days. The government suspended it under direct pressure from the IMF, which refused to allow any reversal of the liberalized trade policies. These global rules categorize European cash payouts to their own growers as acceptable domestic support, while banning African protective tariffs as market distortion. Subsequent trade agreements, like economic partnership agreements with the EU, permanently locked in these low tariffs, ensuring local canneries could never recover. International trade laws essentially codified a rigged game, legally removing West Africa's political power to defend its own industries. Today, West Africa's most populous nations rely almost entirely on imported Italian and Chinese paste for daily nutrition. In Ghana, virtually all of the 100,000 tons consumed each year comes from abroad. This creates extreme vulnerability, leaving national diets at the mercy of global supply chain disruptions and foreign currency fluctuations. As processing machinery rusts and factories remain silent, an entire generation of technical expertise and industrial know-how evaporates. This outcome represents the total loss of food sovereignty. Food sovereignty is the right of a nation to control its own food systems and feed its people through local production, rather than foreign dependency. For the farmers whose crops have no market and whose prices are undercut by subsidized imports, The industrial collapse leads to absolute poverty. Abandoning their land, many embark on perilous, undocumented migrations to Europe just to find a means of survival. Their destination is the vast agricultural belt of southern Italy. Displaced West African farmers now provide the cheap migrant labor used to harvest the very Italian tomatoes that, once processed, will be shipped back to bankrupt their homelands. When global rules prioritize subsidized commodities over local resilience, they displace entire populations, eventually forcing people to cross oceans to serve the system that destroyed their livelihoods in the first place.